Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day to get some of that dirty YouTube money so I can afford to provide you folks hands-on, in-person technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. We have a class coming up on AI and web scraping that is completely full in a couple of days. We have a class coming up on extending AI capabilities with REST APIs in about 2 weeks. If you're interested in coming to the classes that I teach, you can go to Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com, and take a look at the schedule. Do remember, free to end user is not actually free. That's why I shake the brain nips every day. If you'd like to throw some money into the donor box link down below, that would be ever so lovely. And with that, let's get into laughing at Europeans. Yay! I gotta say, the favorite thing that I like to do on the Daily Blob is talk about the layoffs. Nothing puts a smile on my face than discussing tens of thousands of people being thrown out of their jobs, having to learn how to spread their buttholes out behind their local 7-Elevens. That just brings a little warmth to my heart. But if I can't talk about that, the other thing that I like to talk about is basically how much Europe sucks. Oh, those arrogant SOBs saying how bad everybody else is as their Titanic sinks into the sea. So anyways, I think this is an interesting story just to kind of solidify just how screwed Europe is, right? Like when I talk about Europe, I just talk about my normal frustrations with Europe. Because again, no matter where I've traveled all over the world, a European has to pop out of the wall to call Americans morons, right? I was in Chile. I was getting browbeat by some fucking European, right? In Canada, browbeat. Cambodia, Thailand, right? An American walks into a room and basically the Europeans like to say how fucking stupid you are, right? I was fucking 2019, I was traveling through Europe trying to have a good old time. It was amazing how many times I go to some place to put my money down and the wait staff or somebody else would just kind of start shitting on the United States. There was this one time I was in Italy. I just had a cup of coffee and literally the guy puts the cup of coffee on my table. It's like this beautiful day, beautiful scenery. I get this nice cup of coffee. I'm handing over my money and then he just starts shitting on the United States. I'm just like, love of Christ. Can I just have a cup of coffee? Can I just have a cup of coffee? Anyways, so one of the things that I find fascinating, right, is Europeans love to talk about how fucking dumb America is. And I don't pay a lot of attention to a lot of the European things because, as I've said about the whole China thing, again, it's not my country, right? I complain about Trump because Trump is my president. I really don't complain a lot about Macron. Who the fuck is Prime Starmer? Is it Starmer? I got confused. You guys have gone through a lot of these fuckers. UK Starmer? I don't think I've ever said a goddamn thing about Starmer, right? Anyways, I don't say a lot in general about a lot of the European stuff because again, it just doesn't matter to me. I mean, I would recommend that the Europeans try to do better, but fuck, they're smarter than me, so I guess they know what the hell's going on. But I do find it fascinating with this whole Nexperia disaster and many other things to see just how fundamentally fucking pathetically weak Europe is. And I think there is a fascinating question about what that means going into the future, right? Because I've talked about that like with pomp and circumstance and things like optics. Like one of the big things with Europe is there is the optics of great power status, right? There's the United States, there's Europe, and there's China. But why do we think Europe is a great power? One, calling Europe is a bit like calling Africa Africa. It's only slightly better than calling Africa Africa. Like it is Europe. There is a European Union, and they got the whole exchange and all that kind of stuff. But they all are individual countries with all of their kinds of problems. But beyond that, right? There's this idea, right? These were the countries that had colonies. These were the countries that had global empires. They were till they committed civilizational suicide twice in the last century. And so it's kind of one of those interesting things to be thinking about is again how valid is Europe on the world stage. And listening, again, it's interesting to listen to the politicians from other places. This isn't simply coming from me, but listening to politicians from Europe to realize, holy shit, they're weak. Like, man, I give Europeans crap, but I didn't quite realize how bad it is. So anyways, this is coming from Euronews, exclusive. Everything can be weaponized, and it is being weaponized. EU Trade Chief Severquak speaks after Nexperia spat. And so I think the Nexperia spat has shown the world just how fucking pathetic Europe is. Which does beg the question, what will Europe do over the next decade? As I've said with the United States, I'm worried many things about the United States, again, over the next decade. I think by 2035, one way or another, we'll get ourselves out of whatever mess it is. I do kind of wonder, though, where Europe is going. Anyways, EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic told Euronews in an exclusive interview that Nexperia incident, quote, is beginning to be resolved, but points to lessons about critical dependencies. Everything can be weaponized. And it's interesting to think about this with Europe, right? How horribly, pathetically vulnerable that they actually are, right? They were getting their gas and their oil supplies from Russia. So the United States has to be in NATO to provide NATO a backbone because Europe was worried about the threat of Russia. And so with Europe being so worried about the threat with Russia, they were buying massive amounts of oil and gas from the people that they considered an existential threat. Even now, they still purchase just a tremendous amount of oil and gas. Literally a nation that is threatening to fucking invade their asses, and they're still drinking down the oil and the natural gas. And you think about that, right? So basically they have the vulnerability to Russia. And then they have the vulnerability to China. Again, what Nexperia has shown with supply chains is you can nationalize a headquarters. If China has the packaging facilities, they probably have the thing that's actually valuable there, right? So think about, I've been talking about Nexperia a lot just simply because it's in the news and it's a good story that keeps going day after day after day. But what else is going on that is Nexperia-like? What is Nexperia a metaphor for the entire European experiment? For the failure, the abject failure of the European experiment. And then on top of that, we have the issue, again, right now with the United States, where one of the things I completely agree with is that the United States needs to get the fuck out of NATO, right? We don't need to fucking deal with European military horse crap, right? If they believe Russia is an existential threat, I would highly recommend they don't buy their energy supplies from Russia. If Europe is going to continue buying energy supplies from who they consider an existential threat, look, buckos, you be you. You're smarter than me. You have informed me you are smarter than me. I want our troops to come home. But the interesting thing that you find is, right, the European intelligentsia, the European, the politicians and all that, the last thing in the world they want is for American troops to go home. So Europe is protected by the United States, who most Americans want our troops to come the fuck home. They are powered by Russia, who is an existential threat. And they're basically getting their products from China, which, that's going well. When you are getting the products required in modern life from the place you put through 100 years of humiliation, there might be some teething issues with that. And you realize, oh my God, these people are weak. Holy fuck, right? Let's see. All critical strategic supplies can be used as weapons against the European Union. Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic told Euronews in an exclusive interview. The EU is dealing with the fallout from the Dutch government's takeover of Nexperia, a chipmaker, citing national security. The move from The Hague has prompted a clash between Europe and China over who controls the company and its finished products, resulting in Chinese restrictions on chip exports. Sefcovic, an experienced politician who oversees the all-important trade portfolio for the EU, said the episode highlights the complexities of the global supply chain as well as the risks associated with critical dependencies on third countries outside the EU. Quote, it very much underlines the lessons we've learned over the past years, and it doesn't concern only China, right? And this is the important thing. This whole Nexperia thing, it's not just China. Today, everything can be weaponized. Yep, Russian gas can be weaponized. F-35s can be weaponized. It's a funny thing. You're like, hey, did you know F-35s can be weaponized? In a bit of a different way than you were thinking, right? Anyways, today everything can be weaponized. Sevkov told the Euronews, for Europe, he argued, it started with Russian gas, then it continued with critical raw materials and high and low-end chips. It can all be weaponized. He suggested that a partial restoration of exports points to a start of a resolution to the standoff for the Nexperia things, but reiterated that the debacle was a warning of the urgent need to diversify. Quote, we are getting information from the car manufacturers to the spare parts producers that they are getting these chips, he told Euronews, quote, but we are only at the beginning of resolving this problem, so we will continue to talk with our Dutch colleagues and Chinese authorities. The Nexperia saga is the latest incident between China and the EU over the supply of strategic components used across industries from cars to defense. The Commission is working on a plan to be presented next month that addresses some of these weaknesses. He said that global competition to secure rare earths, critical components, and a stable supply chain required a unified approach. Quote, we have to work a little bit more like Japan, where they're stockpiling some of the critical raw materials, some of that critical technology, and critical chips, he said. Quote, I think this would be one of the lessons which we want to bring in the new economic security doctrine, which we'll be presenting before the end of the year. The EU has been actively pursuing a policy of de-risking, but not decoupling from China, which will keep the door open to trade while applying safeguards to key areas deemed strategic for the EU and closing loopholes into the single market. Quote, economic security and effective export controls would work only if they're applied in harmony and as homogeneous across the EU. And that's one of the big things, too, with the EU, is it is all different countries. Different countries, fully with different governments, trying to get those cats to go all in the same direction can be a pain in the ass. Quote, those who want to abuse the system will always find a weak spot to penetrate the European market and then put the whole European economy in jeopardy, he concluded. And so I think this is going to be an interesting question for Europe going forward with the thing that I wonder, do they have a viable solution? Take the snark aside. Take the European superiority aside. Does Europe have a viable solution to the mess that they've put themselves in over about the past 90 to 100 years? Right? Because we see this. We see this with the United States trying to get the fuck out of NATO. Right? Look at Trump. Look at Trump. Trump has literally talked about invading Greenland, for Christ's sakes. Right? And so all the Europeans are on board that they need to worry more about their defense. But then you actually see what the Europeans are doing for their defense. Oh, it's fucking adorable. It's like the Keystone Cops. It's like watching a military version of the Keystone Cops in French. You don't not really know what they're saying, but it's still funny to watch, right? I mean, you see that, right? They know they need to break away from the United States, but the actual capability to do so, right? Again, with the oil and the gas supplies coming out of Russia, even now, they're still purchasing Russian oil and gas supplies. Russia is literally an existential threat. Putin has literally threatened to nuke motherfuckers, and they're still buying the oil and gas from them, right? Can they actually even decouple from Russia? And then you look at it, with the whole China and all that and trade and everything else. Do they have the capabilities? I talked about this before with Germany, right? The German prime minister came out and literally said China is a threat, right? Chinese blood is toxic to the European soul. Is essentially what he stated. I'm paraphrasing here. Don't sue me, it's a paraphrase, but yeah, that's kind of what he was saying, right? He was talking about that, right? So the 6G rollout, they want no Chinese telecom gear in the 6G rollout. Even with the 5G rollout, they want to rip and replace. So not doing risk mitigation strategies, not auditing, systems to see what their capabilities or their failings may be. No, he wants to rip and replace. And the idea is we want to be self-sufficient. But here's the thing, what you want in life and reality are two entirely different things. Two entirely different things. Right? I want the United States out of NATO. I want to deal with the southern border. I want to decouple from China. And then we got Trump. Trump is calling Canada the 51st state. He's talking about invading Greenland. He's getting us into a war with Venezuela, and he's getting our asses kicked in the trade war with China. There's what you want, and then there's Trump, right? There's what you want, and then what you actually get in life. And so it's interesting to see more and more start coming out of the European sphere with this idea of basically trying to de-risk or decouple, all right, from the places, where they receive the things that are required for their societies, and the fundamental question of, but can they do that? Do they have the technical wherewithal to do it? Do they have the logistical wherewithal to do it? And then do they have the political wherewithal to do it? Will Italy and France and Germany and Spain and these other countries actually work on a viable plan to create self-sufficiency, or will it go to hell? And when you talk about self-sufficiency, right, well, Germany is like, we want to be self-sufficient. And so Spain's like, great, we'll take more factories. And the Germany's like, no, we don't want to build factories in Spain. We want to be self-sufficient. Right? Again, it's interesting. Like this whole military thing, it's fascinating. Look at the military procurement process in Europe and go, wow, that's dumb. That's dumb. Anyways, so it'd be curious to see. And so like as the rhetoric for quote unquote de-risking escalates, because I think that's what the populations of many countries around the world want, right? They want the de-risking or the decoupling. So that rhetoric increases, and with that rhetoric, there has to be some policy change. You can't simply say you got to do something. Maybe not a lot. You got to do something to prove you're actually on board. And so then as they start implementing those rules and regulations to prove that they actually believe in this, then the interesting question becomes, but do they have the wherewithal to go through and deal with all of the consequences past that? And it would be an interesting thing. Like I talk about this with Europe. Like one of the reasons I'm so pissed off at Europe, I get so angry at Europe, is because I saw the possibility. It's like YouTube. I remember when I was excited about YouTube. I'm so bitter about YouTube now because I remember when I was excited about YouTube, right? I'm so bitter about Europe now because I remember when I was excited about Europe. I remember in 2000, I was like, yay, the US is going to have a counterbalance in the world that's a lot like us. That's a lot like us. That would be a good thing. And then Europe did, what Europe does, what Europe does. But a fascinating question is, what happens if Europe collapses? Because it's always funny. Like I always come here, and again, I talk about things. And again, most of the time, I'm worried about the United States. I'm worried about my country because it's my fucking country, right? Europe, for the most part, can do what Europe does. China can do what China does. Most part, other than a few things, don't really care. But there is this fascinating question, especially for the United States, is what if Europe collapses? Right? With the massive trade war that Trump has implemented, with the geopolitical instability that is happening because, Trump has basically said he's not quite sure about the Article 5 thing for NATO, with Europe having issues with China and with Europe having issues with Russia. how much would it actually take to tip the balance, to send that entire continent into a downward spiral? And then an interesting question would then be, again, what happens for the United States? What happens if we no longer even have the dream of a counterbalance in Europe? Where do we go from there? I don't know. It'll be interesting to basically see how all this fleshes out. Like what we saw with Nexperia. Again, this whole Nexperia thing. Like you look at Nexperia and who the fuck cares? It is old school chips, right? I mean, these are chips you basically get out of a Cracker Jack box. Who the fuck cares? Well, apparently all the auto companies, right? And so think about this. If this is one company, this is a disaster coming from one company that's threatening auto supplies, frankly, all around the world. The question is, what other vulnerabilities are there? Like when I talk about the United States, like I talk about the soybean issues, right? So soybeans, we sell 26.3 million tons of soybeans to China every year. Apparently, currently, we've only sold 383,000 tons this year. And there's a big question about whether China will buy more, right? They're supposed to. Somebody said that they're going to buy 12 million tons this year. Or, yeah, but somebody said it. It's not like we actually have a treaty. It's not like we actually have anything written on paper that the Senate, signed off on or whatever else. And so again, that's one of the things like I'm concerned about. Canada, since it's close to us, right? Peas. Was it yellow peas? Yeah, for some reason, China's not buying like their yellow peas. And again, you're like, who the fuck cares? Oh, they're not buying Canadian yellow peas. And then you find out it's like a $10 billion industry in Canada. You're like, oh, okay. Who the fuck knew yellow peas were $10 billion? Apparently it is. All right, so I talk about this stuff in the United States. So whether it's the soybeans or whether it's so many of the other issues that are going on. But the interesting question is, well, if we're having those issues, what are the issues that are going on in Europe? And what are the issues in a consortium of countries that are not really one nation, right? So when the soybean farmers in Ohio and Nebraska and all these places have problems, we have a truly federal government that can try to paper over those problems. Europe, it does get much more complicated. And there is a lot of antagonism there, right? It's interesting, like when you talk about like China, right, and the 100 years of humiliation. Right, so it's easy to look at that. It's like, okay, Europe is here. Europe colonized the world. Therefore, China might be pissed off. But again, Europe is not Europe. Like calling Europe Europe is like calling Africa Africa, right? Right. The Greeks have a few issues with the fucking Germans, right? The Italians have a few issues with the French. Right? There's, again, as I've talked about before, right? There's the brass tacks of business dealings, and then there's emotions. One of the things that I will tell you in life as an ASPE, always keep things purely business, right? It's not personal, it's business. Because motherfucker, as soon as shit in the business world turns personal, it gets so stupid so quickly. And one of the things I think that gets papered over for Europe is there's a lot of feelings there. There's a lot of emotions there that just kind of get papered over so the rest of the world doesn't talk about it a lot, but they're still there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the whole European experiment. And it is. Again, they don't talk about that a lot anymore. It is an experiment. We're not to the end of the experiment. How do you think it'll all work out? So what do you think about this? What do you think about the EU trade chief now coming out and specifically saying everything can be weaponized and basically everything is being weaponized? Do you think the design, the bureaucratic design of the European systems is up to the task of dealing with a weaponized world? Right? Are they basically the equivalent of IPv4 in a zero trust environment? And then what do? Migrate off of IPv4? Oh, that's gonna suck, right? I don't know. it's kind of curious to take a look at. So what do you think out there? What do you think about this? Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing, call me a dumbass. Just leave a strong American comment down there in the comment section, just like a Lutnick would do. Anyways, do remember with these videos, I do these because of Silicon Dojo, free to end user hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do. We have a class coming up on AI and web scraping coming up in a couple of days. That is completely full, but we do have a class on extending AI capabilities with REST APIs coming up in a couple of weeks. These are all in Durham, North Carolina. If you're interested, take a look at the schedule at Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. Do remember, free to end user is not free. That's why I shake the brain nips every day. If you want to throw some dollars in to the donor box link, it is down below. There's a donor box link down below. If you want to throw money into it, that would be lovely. Anyways, see y'all later.